Today we'll be working in my workbook called Nehemiah Part 1, which is Rebuilding the Wall. This is on Nehemiah 1 through 7. And basically, I'm doing a real quick history here. We are part of the Rebuilding or Restoration of Israel series. And this is after the third return of exiles under Nehemiah. And that's about where we are, about 444 to 450, that time. We have completed the first 5 chapters in this book so far. Basically, Nehemiah gets to understand that the walls are destroyed. He prays to God. He gets the request. He gets his request confirmed by the king Artaxerxes that he can go. He brings timber and stuff down to Jerusalem. First thing he does is inspect the walls before he gets started, then tells the people that we're all going to rebuild the walls. So then 4 and 5 is the detail of each of them rebuilding the walls. And it took 52 days, which is amazing, very amazing, for them to complete the walls. And when we talk about chapter 4 and 5, we don't get the impression of what's going on around them as they're building. So now we are actually going to hear from chapter 6 through chapter 8, perhaps, what was going on around them when they were building the walls. Okay, so now we are going to go to chapter 6. Attack from all sides. And this is Nehemiah 4 1 through 23. So this is happening while they are rebuilding the walls. When Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became angry and was greatly incensed. He ridiculed the Jews, and in the presence of his associates in the army of Samaria, he said, "What are these feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they build it, finish in a day? Can they bring the stones back to life from these heaps of rubble burned as they are?" When God had called us to a mission, Satan is going to attack us mentally first. Notice how each one of these attacks are really mental, not physical. Why did Sanballat and his group oppose the rebuilding of the wall? Two main reasons. First, it was due to the animosity between the Jews and Gentiles, as the Jews considered themselves a separate people. Second, a rebuilt Jerusalem with its own temple took both income, resources, and control from the governors. What did Sanballat first do to cause the Jews grief? He ridiculed the Jews. Satan usually uses mockery, which is a distortion of the truth, to defeat the people being mocked without even lifting a physical weapon. Let's see what these words are trying to do. So, in completing number 2, why are those feeble Jews doing? What are those feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? Will they finish in a day? Sanballat is basically looking at the unskilled men, the priests, the merchants, and the women, and seeing weakness. He wants them to know how he has no confidence in them. He wants them to doubt themselves. 3, will they offer sacrifices? Sanballat did not believe in the God of the Hebrews, so did not think their God would help them any. He wants the Jews to doubt their God as well. And number 4, can they bring the stones back to life from these heaps of rubble, burned as they are? Sanballat has a very great point. Where were they? Where will they find materials? Do they imagine they can make burnt limestone firm and strong again, or harden the dust and rubbish into stones? Tobiah the Ammonite, who was at his side, said, "What are they building? Even a fox climbing up on it would break down their wall of stones." So even a fox climbing up on it would break down their wall of stones. Tobiah is pointing out that everything can still get through the walls they are building, as they are neither high nor strong. Nehemiah prayed, "Hear us, our God, for we are despised. Turn their insults back on their own heads. Give them over as a plunder in the land of captivity. Do not cover up their guilt or blot out their sins from your sight, for they have thrown insults into the face of the builders." When is it acceptable to pray for our tormentors to suffer instead of praying for ourselves to be able to endure? What Nehemiah prays here is called an imprecatory prayer. An imprecatory prayer is the kind of prayer that sounds like you really have it in for your enemies. But who can judge Nehemiah's enemies more justly than God? If Nehemiah's enemies are in the wrong, should they not be punished? Nehemiah is asking for justice, not revenge. These men don't just insult Nehemiah. By implication, by insulting his people, they are insulting God and standing against his plans. Sanballat and Tobiah's stance places them squarely at odds with God because they are at odds with his people. Nehemiah simply asks God to turn their desires from his people back onto their own heads. What does Nehemiah do when he hears all the things that Sanballat and his group are saying and the people are probably reacting to? He prays. He prays to God. Does Nehemiah pray for endurance of his people or justice against his enemies? What is this type of prayer called? Um, Justice against his enemies, and this is called imprecatory prayer. There are actually several times in the Old Testament that imprecatory prayers exist. But we, as New Testament believers, are told to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. What changed? So again, Psalm 55:15, let death take my enemies by surprise. Let them go down alive to the realm of the dead, for the evil finds lodging among them. What changed? Jesus' death and his love for everyone. We don't know when someone could change their mind about Christ. That's what changed in my mind. Nehemiah 4:6. So we rebuilt the wall till all of it reached half its height, for the people worked with all their heart. Do we see any evidence of God punishing Sanballat and his group? No, we don't. Does it appear that God gave all the builders the endurance and ability to continue their work without anxiety or sense of hopelessness? Yes. How far was all the wall built at this point? Half its height. To give you an idea of how much work that has been done, realize that the wall will be 39 feet tall. So now they are at 19.5 feet high, or the equivalent of a two-story building in height. The length of the wall is 2.5 miles long, or about as long as the National Wall in Washington, D.C. Its width is definitely wider than you would expect. It was 8 feet in width, and that's not the broad wall, which was 23 feet in width. Even half of this wall being fully completed was quite an accomplishment. When it says that they have built all of the wall half its height, how high is that? That is 19.5 feet high. How long is the wall around Jerusalem? 2.5 miles long. What is the normal width of the wall? The normal width is 8 feet in width, and the width of the broad wall is 23 feet in width. Remember, all this work is done by people without the skills of building with the limestone materials that had been burnt when Jerusalem was destroyed over 70 years prior. When Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, the Ammonites, and the people of Ashdod heard that the repairs to the Jerusalem walls had gone ahead and that the gaps were being closed, they were very angry. They plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and stir up trouble against it. But we prayed to our God and posted a guard day and night to meet this threat. Sanballat is from Moab, Tobiah is from Ammon, Geshem is from Arabia, and the last group is Ashdod's. Circle all those areas in the map below. Well, okay, see what we got. We've got Ammon. We've got Moab. We've got Arabia, which would be Idumea and south. Okay. And Ashdod's. Oh, okay. Does it appear from the scripture that they had thought their previous mocking and bullying would have stopped the rebuilding of the wall? Yes, they were surprised that it had continued. What did they decide they were going to do? They were going to fight against Jerusalem, but they never actually went through with it. Does it appear that Nehemiah and the Jews found out about it? Absolutely. There are two possible ways that the Jews could have found out about this plot. The first is through a spy that later told Nehemiah what they learned. The second is that Sanballat fed this information to the Jews to hopefully cause confusion without even actually going to battle. Which one do you think actually happened? Because they never actually went to battle, I'm thinking that he fed it to cause grief without them even doing anything. As soon as Nehemiah and the Jews heard about it, what two things did they do? Uh, we prayed and posted a guard day and night to meet the threat. Meanwhile, the people in Judah said, the strength of the laborers is giving out, and there's so much rubble that we can't rebuild the wall. Also, our enemies said, before they know it or see us, we'll be right there among them and we'll kill them and put an end to the work. Then the Jews who lived near them came and told us 10 times over, wherever you turn, they will attack us. Sometimes the greatest weapon Satan has is fear. Fear and faith are really opposites. Although everyone had prayed, it seemed that this news from their enemy came at their weakest moment. There are several thoughts that could have stopped all the rebuilding. Let's take a look at all of them. One, the strength of the laborers is giving out. Just like when Peter took his eyes off Jesus when he walked on water and then began to sink. The people here do not fully fathom that God has given them the strength to get this much done already. They are seeing with their eyes how much they have done, which was a lot, instead of having faith that God will continue to give them the strength until they are done. Two, there is so much rubble that we can't rebuild the wall. Definitely true. I'm sure there were people who were removing the rubble as fast as they could, but still it was piling up. The easiest time to feel defeated is when you work so hard and have only gotten halfway through your project. Our enemies said, before they know it or see us, we'll be right there among them and we'll kill them and put an end to the work. The threat was doing its job. It was defeating the Jews without the enemy even lifting a weapon. Therefore, I stationed some of the people behind the lowest points of the wall at the exposed places, posting them by families with their swords, spears, and bows. After I looked things over, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your families, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your homes. We know that Nehemiah prayed, but what else did he have done to prepare for the attack of the enemy? He posted families with swords, spears, and bows. The people stationed to fight were not by themselves, but by their families. After Nehemiah had all the guards set up, he first told the people, don't be afraid of them. Don't be afraid. Why are the people not to be afraid? Because God is with them. Does this go for us as well? If we have God on our side, should we be afraid of what's going to happen? No, technically, if God is on our side, we shouldn't be afraid of what's going to happen. The end of verse 14 gives us an idea as to why Nehemiah had the guards stand with their families near their homes. What do you think? If their family was with them, then they're going to fight for their families, their daughters, their wives, and their homes. Here we have prayer and action. Does God expect the same from us? Pray and then do all you can to prepare? Yes. Why? Because we still have to work. We still have to be put in action depending on what God has us to do. Nehemiah 4:15. When our enemies heard that we were aware of their plot and that God had frustrated that, yet and that we all returned to the wall, each to our own work. From that day on, half of my men did the work, while the other half were equipped with spears, shields, bows, and armor. The officers posted themselves behind all the people of Judah who were building the wall. What did the enemy hear? We were aware of their plot when God had frustrated it. Did the enemy see the work continue on the wall? Yes, they did. But what now additional did they see at the walls of the workers? Many were equipped with spears, shields, bows, and armor, and the officers were posted behind. Did the fear of the plot stop the work on the walls like the enemy had hoped? Nope. Do we yet have any evidence of the enemy actually attacking the walls? Nope. So the men were armed with weapons, with their families near their homes building the wall. Where were the officers posted? Right behind them. What do you think took away the defeatist attitude that people had in verses 10 through 11? God, the cavalry, or the soldiers, having their weapons with them, and being near their families. Nehemiah 4:17. Those who carried materials did their work with one hand and held the weapon in the other. And each of the builders wore their sword at his side as he worked. But the man who sounded the trumpet stayed with me. Through the last few scriptures, we have seen many types of people prepared for battle. Nehemiah 4:13. Well, let's see here. Okay. The people were stationed behind the lowest points of the wall at the exposed places with their, let's see if I can find the answer. Sorry about that. Every once in a while I get distracted here. Oh, there it is. Okay. The people were stationed behind the lowest points of the wall at the exposed places with their families, their swords, spears, and bows. Nehemiah 4:16. From that day on, half of my men did the work, while the other half were equipped with spears, shields, bows, and armor. Nehemiah 4:16-17. The officers posted themselves behind all the people of Judah who were building the wall. And 4:17. Those who carried materials did their work with one hand and held a weapon in the other. And 4:18. Each of the builders wore their sword at his side as he worked. So we've seen many types of people prepared for the battle. Who was the one man that stayed with Nehemiah while he supervised all the work? The one who sounded the trumpet. This man was ready to sound the trumpet as soon as there was any evidence of attack. Then I said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, the work is extensive and spread out, and we are widely separated from each other along the wall. Whenever you hear the sound of their trumpet, join us there. Our God will fight for us. The work is extensive and spread out, and we are widely separated from each other along the wall. Looking back on page 77, what is the length of the wall again? Well, you can look back, but the length of the wall is 2.5 miles long, and I compared it to the Washington Mall. Notice the first word of verse 20. You would expect the word whenever, but what word is used instead? Wherever. This does give us the indication that Nehemiah and his trumpeter moved around a lot. When the people heard the sound of the trumpet, are they to stop work and prepared for battle? Yes. Or did Nehemiah tell them to do something different? Basically, they weren't to prepare for battle. They were to come to join him there, wherever the trumpeter in Nehemiah was, which was what I just said. Instead of the people fighting, who did Nehemiah say would do the fighting for them? God. So then explain why they had weapons in the first place, in case they were caught by surprise and Nehemiah didn't catch it ahead of time. And also to make them feel like they had some kind of protection. Nehemiah 4:21. So we continued the work with half the men holding spears from the first light of dawn until the stars came out. At that time I also said to the people, have every man and his helper stay inside Jerusalem at night, so they can serve us as guards by night and as workers by day. Neither I nor my brothers nor my men nor the guards which took with me took off our clothes. Each had his weapon even when he went for water. How long were the men holding spears preparing for battle? The light of dawn to the stars coming out. Why only this length of time and not during the night? Because there will be guards at night. Were there guards at night? Yes. We do have evidence that many people probably lived outside the walls of Jerusalem. Look again at the summary on page 71 and the map on 72. How many groups of people were from outside the city? Well, you can look at that, but I'm sure I've got the answer here. So hang on. It looked to be 9 groups of people that normally lived outside the city. What gives us evidence that Nehemiah was ready anytime, day or night, to handle the situation? He slept with his clothes on with the weapon nearby. Even when he went for water means when he went to wash up. So we come to the end of this chapter, and I hope it was helpful to you. So let's see if we can answer these questions. Posted themselves behind all the people of Judah? That would be the officers. What did each of the builders wear on their side as they worked? It would be a sword. Sanballat's first attack was through ridicule or mockery. 6 of Nehemiah's enemies, which one is a Moabite? Sanballat. Of Nehemiah's enemies, which one was an Ammonite? Tobiah. The man who stayed near Nehemiah's side would blow the trumpet if an alarm was needed. In Nehemiah 4:7, a new group is added to the list of enemies. They are the people of Ashdod, I think. People of Ashdod, yes. About midway through the building, the strength of the laborers is giving out. One down. What is wider than the regular wall or the broad wall? Broad. 3, Nehemiah prayed a special kind of prayer. What kind is it? Imprecatory prayer. When the wall was half its height, it was equal to the height of a 2-story building. Of Nehemiah's enemies, which one is an Arab? It would be Geshem. Geshem. So that's the end of this chapter, and I hope you enjoyed it. Bye now.